so you're ready to take your logo and save it in multiple formats for your team. I'd like to show you how to go through that process. There's a number of ways you could do this, but I'm going to walk us through a way that I've found works pretty well, and it's pretty easy and straightforward. For starters, I'm going to need you to open up your Adobe Illustrator file. In class, we named it AM or PM, last name, first initial, A7. That should be in your Assignment 7 folder. Once you open that file, you might end up with stuff out here floating on the outside or over here on the right-hand side. So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and delete that stuff out here and out here on the right. So all that you should have left is your two logos on this document. I'm going to hit undo for a second and take a step back. You don't need to follow along with me by clicking around, but I do want to show you something as it relates to using the color black within your logo design. What we have here are two squares that look like they're both the same color black. Over here in my toolbar, if I click on one, it shows black. If I click on another, it shows black. If I select them both, there's a question mark. And you know from previous videos or in class discussion that if I see a question mark, that means I have two things selected that are different colors. So what I want to show you, if I open up my color palette and I select this first square, all of the colors C, M, Y, K are all set to 100. If I select the second one, C, M, Y are all set to 0 and black is set to 100. Visually they look exactly the same on the screen, but the way they function is completely different in a different program. So I'm going to jump over to Photoshop, and I've already previously copied those squares into Photoshop. And what you see when we jump into Photoshop are the differences now. This one on the bottom right looks kind of grayish, and the one on the top left looks very rich and very dark. And so as I even zoom in further, you can see that those two colors are drastically different. So if I select my color palette over here, my foreground color, and I click on this black square, you'll see that my picker jumps down to the bottom right. If I choose this one on the right, the color jumps to the left. Over here, it's kind of grayish in color. So the reason I show you that is if you ever get your file into Photoshop and you're realizing that the black colors that you chose are actually turning out gray, here's how you fix that problem. So before you put anything into Photoshop, like a JPEG or a PNG file or even a Photoshop file, what you want to do is take all the things that are black on that particular logo or that illustration and change the color value. So in my case, if I select this, all of these things get selected. That's how I designed this logo. And I'm going to double click on the foreground color, and I simply want to drag this over to the bottom right corner, or I could change CMYK to 0, 0, or 100 rather, 100, and 100, and hit OK. Now what will probably happen if I double click on this again is, oh good, they stayed at 100, so all that should be black, perfect. And now if I were to bring that over into Photoshop, it would be nice and rich color. Okay, from here I'm going to go ahead and hit save. If that was bothering you previously, like when you open up a PDF, you could certainly change that to a full rich color black and go ahead and save over this file. Now what we're going to do is take our logo, and we want to go ahead and get it into a format that we could work with in Adobe Photoshop. And ultimately we want to save a couple versions of this document, mostly for our teammates next door, but also for the person sitting next to you. So let's assume that your logo was chosen. If your logo was chosen, you would need to go through a process of getting this file in multiple formats to give to all your teammates. So pretend that your logo was chosen, even if it wasn't, okay? I'm going to have you go through this process. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a rectangle just out here, and I'll explain why in a minute. Like, I'll make it out here. You don't have to make it the same size as your template. Just in here somewhere is fine. Really, it doesn't matter, but like where you make it, you just want to make it bigger than your logos. And I'm going to hit this little arrow to swap these so the black line is around the logos. So what I want is for this black line to be up over the top of my logo here and space on either side. That's perfectly fine. And I'll explain what this does here in just a few minutes. Okay, from here I'm going to go ahead And I don't want to save this file now over the Illustrator file. At this point, I don't want to save it anymore into Illustrator. Instead, what I want to do is go ahead and export this file. So I'm going to go File, Export, and I want to say Export As. Now when I export as, I'm going back to the folder where all my stuff is, so H drive, graphics and assignments, A7 documentary logo, and I'm going to export this file by clicking on the Save As type down here at the bottom, and you could see in here that I could export as a PNG file directly out of Adobe Illustrator, which is pretty cool. I could export as a JPEG directly out of Adobe Illustrator. I could also export as a Photoshop file, and that's what you and I are going to do. Now for future reference, you might need to export, somebody might ask for a JPEG of your file. Here's one way to do it out of Illustrator. Go File, Export, choose that JPEG. But again, for today, we're going to choose Photoshop, and I'm going to hit Export, and I already have a file named that, so I'm going to overwrite it, and this new window pops open. Now ultimately, we need to change our color mode to RGB, but we're not going to do that yet. Instead, we're going to leave it at CMYK. Leave your resolution at 300, choose Write Layers, okay, and from here we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And this file begins to export. And that should be good. I'm going to go ahead and jump over to Photoshop. If you don't have Photoshop open, go ahead and pause this movie and do that now. Now I'm going to open that file that I just exported. File, Open. And I could see in that document folder, assignments, A7 documentary title logo, here's that Photoshop file. Go ahead and open that file, and there we go. So now what you see is that line that I created, that black line, goes out here. Now, what would have happened if I didn't create that black line? Well, Photoshop, when I exported, it would have cropped down to the bottom of this text, down here at the bottom, to the right of that text over here, and this part would have rested just on top of this color. It would have looked like that. And so what that does is it pinches down, and sometimes it removes like a pixel across the top of our logo. So I didn't want to do that. That is why I had you create that big rectangle around your artwork. And that's why I didn't really care where it landed out here. I just want it to be bigger than your actual logos. Now what we're going to do is go through the process of cropping down on our logo and then saving it in multiple formats. Now, if your teammates want the black version of your logo, you would begin this process by cropping down, just like I'm going to do. I'm actually going to crop down onto my color version of my logo. So whichever logo you want to give to your teammates for them to use in their video, then you would go through the process for this logo. So I'm going to use my crop tool. It's the third tool down on the left-hand column of your toolbar, and I could simply click and drag in here somewhere, and I could zoom in. Control spacebar allows me to zoom in, and I just want to move my crop tool around a little bit and give myself just a little cushion around the outside of this logo, and that's looking pretty good. I'm going to hit Enter on my keyboard. Now I want to save this logo for my teammates in several different formats. But I want to give them a file that they could use that has a transparent background on it, like this one does. So that checkerboard pattern indicates that there's transparency. What I know is that my layer here called artwork, if I toggle this on and off, all of my text and the red imagery is on that artwork layer. Whereas this layer, cart multimedia, I could just take and throw in the garbage. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Boom. Next, I'm going to go up to Image, Image Mode, RGB. This is extremely important. For my teammates in the video lab to use my logo, it has to be in RGB color mode. So I have to change it to Image Mode RGB. And all that did was take the pixels that are made up to, or the colors that are being used to make up these pixels, changes them from CMYK to RGB. And again, your teammates definitely need that. Next, we're going to go to Image, Image Size. Now, our teammates do not need a file that's 300 resolution. Instead, what they need is a file that's 72 resolution. So we're going to click this box or uncheck this box. I'm going to change my resolution to 72. And now watch what happens to my inches up here at the top. It was pixels a second ago, but when I uncheck this, now it jumped to inches. I changed this to 7.2. Now, this logo is about 12 inches wide and 14 inches tall. Now I could check this box again, change my inches to pixels, and I could see that it's pretty big, height of 1000 pixels, and I hit OK. This is going to work perfect for my teammates next door. Now your pixels aren't going to match mine perfectly because you cropped yours differently than mine. Some of you have a horizontal logo. I'm working with a vertical logo. So everybody's pixels are going to be a little bit different. From here, I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'm going to begin to put all this stuff into a folder for my teammates. So I'm going to create a brand new folder in here, and I'm going to call it Final Doc. Let's see, and take it back. I'm going to name this file Doc Logo Final, just like that, Doc Logo Final. And I'm going to double click on this folder, and I'm going to go into this folder, and I'm going to rename this file here, Doc Logo Final. And I'm going to make sure that this is set to PSD, which it already was, but I'm just going to double check. First option there, PSD, and I'm going to save this file. There we go. So I'm saving that for my teammates. Now, I could have done something different and call it Doc Logo Final _ color or _ red, or if you're saving the logo, black logo, you could call it black. If it's a white logo, you could call it white. And that way it indicates to your teammates which logo they're working with. All right, I'm going to have you save this as one more version of this logo for your teammates. We're going to go File and Save As. This time, instead of Photoshop.psd, we're going to choose PNG. There we go, Doc Logo Final, PNG. I'm going to hit Save, and compression, none, fast, small, slow is perfect, and hit OK. And now I saved a PNG file of this logo for my teammates. So either one of those should work perfectly for my teammates if they wanted to bring it into After Effects or directly into Premiere. Those are the pixel-based versions of this logo. Now I'm going to take a step back and close this template and minimize Photoshop and go back to Illustrator. At this point, I could delete this rectangle that I created. I don't need it anymore. Instead, what I'm going to do is grab this logo on top. If you want to use the black version at the bottom, that's fine. I'm going to use my color version. So I use my black arrow, and I click and drag to grab everything on here. I'm going to hit Control-C to copy. I'm going to go File, New, and create a brand new document. And my new document, I'm going to make it horizontal or vertical depending on the structure of my logo. Now in my case, this particular logo is taller than it is wide. Therefore, it's considered vertical. Now yours might be wider than it is tall. If that's the case, you would consider your logo horizontal. Another word for those are portrait and landscape. So in my case, I'm going to change a letter size document. I'm going to choose a letter size document, and I'm going to choose portrait because that's vertical. If yours is horizontal, you would choose a letter size document, and you would choose landscape. I'm going to hit Create, and I have a brand new document that has nothing on it. Previously, I copied that color logo. I'm going to paste it, Control-V, and now I'm going to go ahead and scale this up. Now my logo, the way I designed it, doesn't have any strokes. You might discover that with this selected, you have fill color and stroke color. So that could prove to be problematic down the road. For now, it determines how you need to scale up your logo. For me, I could probably just drag this up while holding Shift and let go of my mouse and then let go of the keyboard. But I'm going to show you a new trick. Over here, we have what's called a scale tool. I'm going to double click on that scale tool, and this scale tool gives me options. Uniform is what I want to work with. Here I could say scale corners, scale stroke, and effects. This is always good to check. So you may have fill colors, you may have stroke colors, but you want to check this box. I'm going to go ahead and make my logo 200% bigger and hit OK. And what I want this logo to do is begin to fill up this rectangle. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger this time. I'm going to say 120. There we go. And double click. Maybe I do it one more time. 120. There we go. So that's filling up that rectangle pretty good. Now the reason I wanted to fill up that rectangle is because I'm going to save this file and I'm going to give it to my video students next door. And what happens is if I have a bunch of space between my logo and this black line, what happens, for instance, if this logo were really tiny like this, my teammates would get this massive rectangle that shows up in their After Effects document with this little tiny image. So there's a bunch of space out here that's just not necessary. So instead what I'm going to do is scale this thing up pretty big and have it fill up this space. And once I do, now I know that there's just a little bit of space on the outside of this logo. So this is going to work really well for my team. Now, after you've resized your logo, you're going to want to do one important step. Now you've created this logo on your computer, and it's possible that you haven't outlined your font yet, which is perfectly fine. However, if you give this logo to your teammates and they don't have your font, they're going to have a lot of trouble working with it. So before you do anything else, we're going to select everything, Control A, and make sure you outline your fonts, Shift Control O. My fonts were already outlined, so you don't see any difference, but for you, you might have had some text that looked like this, and when you selected it, you had this line down here which indicates that it's type. Shift Control O turns everything to outline so you can work with those points. So make sure you outline your fonts before you give this to your teammate. Now what we're ready to do is separate our logo into several different layers. Now we're going to pretend that I've already spoken with my teammates, and my teammates have said that they want to animate this logo. They want the word city to arrive on screen, and then they want this background image with the shape around the outside to appear simultaneously, and then just like fade in, and then they want the word sky to fade in. So it goes city in the sky, kind of fades in one after the other. So what I have to do is provide this to my teammates separated into multiple layers. There's several ways to do this, and I'll show you a couple different options. The first option is to grab your white arrow, and when you do, you highlight your C or anything on your document that you're beginning to separate into multiple layers. So I'm going to click on the C, I'm going to hold down Shift and click on the I. Holding Shift allows me to select multiple things, and notice that I'm not clicking on the outermost points of this Y. I'm clicking right in the middle. What that does is allow me to select that whole letter form. So now with those 4 letters selected, I'm going to create a brand new layer. I'm going to drag this highlighted area up to the new layer, and I'm going to rename that new layer City. Next, I'm going to toggle this layer on and off, and you can see that that layer is called City, and that text disappears when I turn this on and off. So here's a separate technique now. I'm going to use my black arrow to select this whole logo. Now what probably happened, well what happened with me at some point is I grouped everything, and yours may not be that case, but you know, it also may be selected. So what I'm going to do is show you how to deselect. So I have everything selected in here. Maybe not. Let's see. There we go. So I have everything selected in here. And what I want to do is deselect, and I want to deselect everything except for the text SKY. So what I'm going to do is with my white arrow, I'm going to deselect by holding on the Alt key and the Shift key. And I'm just going to click and drag over all of the INTHE text and this shape here and this shape here and the outermost shape. But I'm not going to cross the letters of the SKY. So I'm going to deselect all of these things, and what's left now is the SKY. Remember, I was holding down the Alt and the Shift key. So again, Shift and Alt, I click and drag to deselect. Now this does 2 things. The Alt key makes this selection, whatever line it crosses, it selects a whole path, and then the Shift key allows me to deselect. So now I have the word sky. I'm going to create a new layer, drag this highlight up to that new layer, and I'm going to call it SKY. and I'll rename the bottom layer NV. There we go. So now we have our 3 layers: city in the sky. And since I've already discussed what the animation is going to look like for my teammates, this is what they're expecting from me. So I'm going to save this one more way for my teammates, and I should be done. File, save as, and you're going to go into that same folder where you created your doc logo final. And in here, we're going to save this file. Make sure your type is set to .ai. Change your name to doc logo final. So type this out, doc logo final. And then right here at the end, we're going to put underscore LYRD for layered. From here, I'm going to hit save. And you should be going through a process of saving your logo. A new window may pop up, and just hit OK through that, and you should be good to go. Mine is taking a little bit longer than expected to save, but it should happen very quickly. So next thing I want to do is go into my folder where all my stuff is, and I want to see what's going on in there. Previously, I had an Assignment 7 Illustrator file, and then I had an Assignment 7 PDF. You've already submitted the PDF to me. Through this video, you exported as an Assignment 7 Photoshop file, and from that Photoshop file, you and I created and saved logos into this folder called Doc Logo Final. From Photoshop, we saved a Photoshop file by cropping down on it, changing the colors to RGB, and changing the resolution, and then we saved a PNG file, which is also here. Finally, we went back to Illustrator, we got our logo, we copied it into a brand new template, and we outlined the fonts, we separated those elements into layers, and then we saved that file as doc logo final. And what we're looking at here is now the Illustrator file. I'm going to take a step back. This folder now you're going to give to your team. Now, every single one of you went through this process, but not every one of you is going to give your logo to your team. Only the person whose logo was chosen. So if your logo was chosen, I would like you to take this folder and copy it and put it into your class share folder. So you're going to mul share, class share, AM or PM, and you're going to go into your group folder and find a home for this master folder. At that point, you could tell your teammates that this is the logo that they're going to use for their materials. Video students will import this into After Effects. Graphic students can simply open this, grab the logo, copy, and paste it into their documents. That's it. It's kind of a lengthy process, but we got a chance to save this logo in multiple formats. I hope you enjoyed that process, and you're certainly going to be using that for future logos that you design within this class.